I don't know why I decided to do this video. I don't like this topic very much because it's confusing and hard to explain, and I've kind of already sprinkled it in some previous ones, but in the interest of being a good Samaritan and thorough, I thought it would be important that we discuss tinting versus staining. Because it's easier, we're going to start with tinting strength, all right? Why is that easier? Because it's the same across all mediums, okay? We're talking about pigments, but whether you're using watercolor, acrylic, oil, the same rules apply when it comes to tinting strength and what it means. Unlike staining, where it can kind of get a little convoluted. That's too big of a word for me. I don't even really know what it means. So I have a color here. Okay, so I've got some white and I've got some yellow, and then you can see I've got different blues. Maybe I shouldn't block, okay? The blue over here, this blue does not have a high tinting strength, okay? Over here, I have a blue with a higher tinting strength, and over here, okay? So I want to kind of show how it would tint white and how it would tint to make a green. These are not going to produce the same color, okay? These are not the same color. They're slightly different blues, but I wanted to find blues that were similar enough. So you might say like, well, that blue is lighter, so it won't tint as much. It's different, okay? I hope that that comes across. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to take all this blue and all this yellow and mix them together, okay? Now, this might be kind of deja vu for some of you guys out there, my loyal fans, and I appreciate it. But, you know, for those that are just joining us, welcome. I want you to feel included, okay? Now, with all of that blue, I've got a nice, I would call this a yellowish green. It's a yellow bias green for sure. It's definitely not a bright, I don't know, there's no royal green, but like it's not like a deep rich viridian or anything of that sort. It's not a sap green. It's a bright green. Now I'm going to go over here and mix up this other blue with a high tinting strength with the same yellow that was, okay? And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take just a little bit, okay? Well, now I made a mess. This is about, I don't know, artist science, 20%, all right? And let's just see what happens. Now, I'm not trying to produce the same color, okay? It's going to be a slightly different shade of green. There's different shades of green. But I hope that we can pick this up. Can you see just how much using just a little bit of the higher tinting strength blue produces a very, very darker green because it is stronger. It is strong enough to tint that color to bring it to its level, okay? So, same thing, one more time, this time with white, okay? I'm going to go full on with both of the colors, okay? Look at that. I feel like Bob Ross. Look at that. Look at that. Okay. Look at that. I'm giving myself a little like ASMR effect. It's nice. I can do it myself. So here I've got a blue with a high tinting strength, and what I like to do is just use a little bit of the blue to kind of demonstrate that tinting strength. So we'll make sure I'm being a little bit. That's a little bit, right? All right, we'll see what that does. I'm going to go with all the white. Now I use a very little bit, and I would say that this is still ever so slightly darker than the entire amount I use of here. Now let me just use a little bit more. Look at that. Now why is this important? Why do we have to worry about tinting strength? Well, if you're mixing colors and you're not expecting it, you might put out way too much phthalo blue because you think, well, I'll just load up my palette because I loaded it up with ultramarine blue. Why not load it up with phthalo blue? And you'll realize that you're going to waste a lot of paint because just a little bit is going to go a long way. So make sure that you understand the pigments you're using's tinting strength so that you avoid wastage. Is that a word? Waste? Avoid wasting. You can very much ruin a painting by not anticipating that tinting, especially if you're going into something like glazing and you add a little bit of phthalo blue or another high tinting strength pigment to a glazing medium, and then you might realize that, hey, I just gave this painting the blues, and you don't want that. Now, what makes a paint a higher tinting strength? Okay, sometimes it's just the nature of the pigment, all right? It could just be a higher tinting strength pigment, like phthalos in nature are more higher tinting. What are some other ones that have higher tinting strength? Most inorganic.
Yes, especially chemical-made.
Chemical
lab-made
pigments. Yeah.
pigments.
So if it's made by a man, it's going to leave its mark. Also, pigment load. So if you're using a student quality paint that doesn't have a higher pigment load, even though that pigment might have a higher tinting strength, it might not work quite as powerfully if it was a higher pigment loaded paint. Now we're going to talk about loads another day. Man, I love that topic. So I need to clean up, and we're going to strike this, and we're going to move on to staining. Okay? And staining is a little tricky, but you'll see, we're going to have fun. All right, so now we're talking about staining. Now staining is a little bit, is it more complex? I don't know, it's a little bit more complex than tinting strength. It is mostly exclusive to watercolor artist problems, okay? You know, watercolor artist problems, that's very specific. It can affect just about any medium, but in watercolor specifically, a staining pigment is something that does exactly what it sounds like, staining. Now, how do you get staining? What causes staining, right? Penetration causes staining. Penetration will cause staining, all right? I just put that up there. Why is it? What? It is. It's true. Okay? Now, the pigment particle sizes of staining pigments are usually ground down very fine. Now, why are they grinding them down so fine that they're going to stain my paper? That's annoying. Well, different pigments need different levels of grinding, and different pigments need different levels of mill grinding sizes. Some need to be smaller than others. You won't be able to tell by your plain, naked eye, but, in those factories, they can definitely tell the difference if those pigments have not been crushed down to the proper amount. Over-crush some pigments, and they'll dull. Staining is exactly what it sounds like. It leaves a stain. So why is that important to know? Well, if you're doing something like watercolor, it will not lift as easily or as nicely as a color that's less staining. So I don't even remember which one of which is what, but one of these is staining and one of them's not staining, and we're just going to spray it and try to lift some paint up. Okay. Now this is dry. I'm going to hit that with a little bit of water, okay?
Whoa.
Yep, brace yourselves. Winter's coming. Okay.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, well, you're the only one that doesn't watch Game of Thrones. Now, sorry. Okay. So give it a second. I'm gonna just try to pull some of this up. Okay, lifting is a typical watercolor technique, so I've been told. Okay, now I dip it. Touch. Don't wipe yet. Then blot. 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 All right, that left a mark. I hope that was not the non-staining pigment. These art supplies, it's like they say, like, the rules are don't work with children, don't work with animals, don't work with art supplies. Those are the rules. All right, so we're going to go into this other one here. And can you see how this one's giving me less of a hard time coming up? Will, can you see that? No, I just went over it again with the same thing, which I'm a big dummy, but you guys already. So when you're working with a non-staining pigment, it will lift easier to allow reworking or changing, okay? Now again, that has to do with the pigment size penetrating the paper fibers deeper. So this pigment over here is staying more kind of on top of that paper, even though it's been sized and everything appropriately. Because the pigment size is larger, it's not penetrating the paper and leaving a stain. Now, you shouldn't necessarily avoid staining colors. There's a lot of great reasons why you should still use a staining color. Give me a good reason. Okay, you should just come up here and say that into my mic. Come on, you're going to be on. You're going to be famous.
So the staining pigments, you can use them actually almost like an opaque pigment because you just paint them a little heavier, still thinned down, but they're nice and opaque. Like if you think of the dioxazine violet,
Oh, I always think of
the
that.
phthalo blues, phthalo greens, you don't have to use very much pigment and you get a very nice, deep, very dark color.
You still have ammonia, don't you? Oh boy. Before I lose my voice, staining and tinting are mutually exclusive to a degree, but you will find that staining pigments are usually higher tinting strength as well. If staining scares you in your watercolor, what are some things you can do to avoid it? Well, there are limited options, but there are things you can do. If you're using a hot press paper, which is smooth, okay? So I always remember hot press is smooth, like an iron, you've ironed it out, it's basically what they've done. That will prevent some of that penetration from happening, causing stains. The rougher your paper, the easier it will be penetrated and the more staining you'll have. Paper with a heavier sizing, okay? So using a high quality paper is going to prevent some of that penetration from happening, because a paper like this, which is probably just, arch watercolor paper, is internally and externally sized, which gives it a little bit of help too. If you're using a low quality paper, everything might stain it. And then also, if you want, you can add gum arabic to your paints, which is an ingredient that reoccurs in your paints as well. But adding a little more will also prevent that staining, okay? And please, 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 if you're playing along at home, don't wear nice clothes, okay? I learned that one the hard way. When it comes to other mediums besides watercolor, things like oils and acrylics, you still should take care when dealing with staining pigments, okay? Especially if you're doing tintings and glazes. These are things that can affect, and you should know going into it how it will affect before you put it on your nice final product. So it's important that you know the difference between tinting versus staining just as much as you know the difference between oil versus watercolor, just as much as you know the difference between me and Instagram at Mike Not Jerry. See that? Nice little plug there. Where we're continuing to add original content and things that will continue to turn you onto art and hopefully get you inspired to do more. And please, follow me there, follow us here on YouTube. And if you have any further questions, please put them below. It might inspire another part of the series. I might answer it. I might do another just a tip. You never know with me. And of course, as always, please share these videos and get the word out that I'm having a good time with myself and you. We're having a good time. Share it. Don't you? The larger the party, the bigger the party? Yeah. The larger the party, the bigger the party. So let's make it a bigger party. Yeah. Okay. Well, then with that. No, oh. Who tests a staining pigment wearing nice clothes? This guy. I was wearing this nice North Face jacket, and I'm like, all right, one of these is the staining one, and it was the alizarin crimson, which is staining. And I wasn't using paper towels, I was using a rag trying to be green. And I blot it, and I pick it up, and of course it didn't absorb the water on the rag I was using, and it just hits my jacket. I'm like, ah! So I'm running, and I'm wiping, and then it's streaking, and I got it out. I did use a spot stain remover.
Let's talk about staining.
Staining, right. Oh, right. What are we doing today? All right, so now we're talking about staining. Now, staining